Number 10, Notre Dame. They had a bye this week, but I have them back in the top 10. Have they gotten better? Yes. Is everything fixed? No, but the path forward for Notre Dame is pretty simple. Win and you're in. And their defense is starting to show up a little bit more, so if they take care of business, they will make the playoff. Number 9, BYU. They had a bye, so they didn't play either, but when you look at their resume, they have a few quality wins. They have beaten SMU, and they have that 29-point win over Kansas State. The question for them is, are they going to slip up, and if so, when? You look at the rest of their regular season schedule, they have Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston. I don't know if they're going to go undefeated and go 12-0 through the rest of their opponents, but they are on a path for a Big 12 championship game, and all 4 of these remaining games are winnable. Number 8, Tennessee. They get the win over Kentucky. They move on. This is a team where you like their defense. Their defense gets after you. Offensively, they do enough. They don't really scare you on that side of the ball. I think they're only averaging about 23 points per game on offense in the last 5 games. But in 2 weeks, they go to Georgia, and that's going to be a monster game in the SEC you'll have to keep your eye on. Number 7, Texas. They had a bye this last week. They didn't play, but it feels like they're in a weird spot where they're only a 1-loss team, but it feels like that maybe they're underperforming as well. You lose to Georgia, then you go at Vanderbilt the next week. You pull it out. You win by 3. I wasn't too concerned about that Vanderbilt game, or I guess I should say that result and the way that game played out didn't surprise me. They had a bye this week. So the last 3 weeks for Texas have been loss, 3-point win on the road at Vanderbilt, and a bye. So we don't really know what to think of Texas right now. I think the most concerning thing about them is their defense. The first 6 weeks of the season, their defense only gave up 38 points. In the last 2 games that they've played against Georgia and Vanderbilt, they've given up 54. So let's see what this team does and comes back with against Florida next week. I bet they dominate that game with no DJ Lagway for the Gators, but let's see if Texas can get back on track. Number 6, Indiana. This is a top 10 team for Indiana, and I did not think I'd be saying this to start the season. They waxed Michigan State at home. Their offense is on fire. Their defense is showing up and making plays, and they have a path to the playoff. They finished the regular season with a home game against Michigan, at Ohio State, and then they close it out with Purdue. Let's assume that they lose to Ohio State and Columbus and that they do not make the Big Ten championship game. My guess is that Indiana team gets in. Now, it's hard to exactly say that because we need to see how the field plays out. An Indiana team who has 1 loss, especially if it's a close, hard-fought loss on the road against Ohio State, I don't see how that team can be left out of the playoff. Number 5, Penn State. They lost at home to Ohio State. That loss in itself is not a big deal because you can lose now in the 12-team playoff, and that's fine. But this is just a reoccurring thing with James Franklin, and this fan base is pissed off. Rightfully so. I get it. They are so sick of James Franklin not being able to win these games. And then on top of that, there's just what feels like bad game management in these big-time games. Penn State was inside the 5-yard line twice, I think, in that game and got 0 points out of that. Unacceptable. Can't do that in a top 5 game like this. He just can't seem to win these big games. He can't beat Ohio State. I think the last time Penn State beat Ohio State and the only time James Franklin beat Ohio State was in 2016, and they needed a block field goal return for a touchdown. So I understand why the fan base is pissed, and it's not easy to say this, but you got to try to put this loss behind you because if Penn State just takes care of business, they are in this playoff no matter what. Number 4, Miami. I keep waiting for them to lose, and they just keep on winning. Cam Ward had a monster game, 400 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and this Miami team, defensively, they're going to give up some stuff, but the offensive avalanche can just hit you out of nowhere. So Miami's in the driver's seat to make the playoff. They're staring at an undefeated season in the face, and I'm just torn. They keep winning games. I keep doubting them. I keep waiting for them to slip up, and they just keep finding ways to win and win and win, and Cam Ward is having a monster season. Number 3, Georgia. So they sleepwalk through some of these games, right? In this game against Florida, if DJ Lagway doesn't go down with an injury, does Florida win that game? I don't know. The outcome might have been a little bit different. But Georgia's really up and down. And it feels like, they'll play up to their competition and even past their competition. You look at that Texas game, right, where they were just blowing them out of the water. And then at times, it feels like they play down to their competition. Kentucky comes to mind. This Florida game obviously comes to mind. And the biggest concern with Georgia, I think, has to be Carson Beck. 17 touchdowns and 11 picks on the year. His last 3 games, he has 5 passing touchdowns and 8 picks. That is not winning football. And that can come back to bite you because they play Ole Miss next week and Tennessee the week after that. So they have to be careful. Number 2, Ohio State. Huge win on the road at Penn State. Ryan Day gets that big-time win he's been chasing for a few years. Will Howard didn't play that good of a game. He actually said post game that it was the worst game he's played all year. Had that pick six early on. Ohio State was down 10-0. Had that fumble through the back of the end zone where he was about to score. So this was a game where Ohio State could have been up like 28-3 in the first half. But Ohio State's offensive line, which is just patchwork, it's been banged up. You lose your left tackle, you slide your left guard out to left tackle, bring in a new left guard. That offensive line did an awesome job, did a much better job than I think what the fan base was assuming they would do going up against a guy like Abdul Carter. And the defense had some huge stops, especially that goal line stand in the fourth quarter. If you're Ohio State, you have to feel really good about this win, but also how you won this game on the backs of your defense and on the backs of your offensive line. Two areas that have had question marks so far this year. Number one, Oregon. Not a whole lot of questions with Oregon. They went on the road, took care of business at Michigan. The biggest question with Oregon, honestly, is the status of Tez Johnson, their leading receiver. He left the game with, I think, a shoulder injury, and then it looked like he had that arm in a sling. He's their leading receiver. He's their best receiver. You do see that they have other weapons. Evan Stewart, they have guys on the outside that can make plays, so that's something to keep an eye on with Oregon moving forward. But Dan Lanning has Oregon as a well-oiled machine right now.